Hi, good afternoon. And what happens if you are injured on the job and you tell your employer, I've been injured on the job? What happens when your employer tells you, oh, I don't have any insurance? What are your options? We're going to discuss that today. Hi, my name is Kaplan Morrell, and I am an attorney who helps injured workers in Colorado, and I've been doing that since 1995. And here at Kaplan Morrell, we are experts and devoted to helping folks with injuries on the job, and a number of folks that we help who call us, and typically they work for roofing companies or construction. Are you screwed if you are injured on the job and your employer goes, well, I don't have any insurance? Let's talk about, we're going to talk about a little bit about what workers' compensation insurance is. What are your options if you are injured on the job and your employer says they don't have insurance, and how can an attorney help you? First, workers' compensation is a state-required insurance for all employers. All employers in Colorado, and frankly other states are very similar, they have to carry workers' compensation insurance. And if they don't, they can be penalized, they can be fined. Strangely, it's also illegal to kill people, and yet we still have people who murder, and so just because something is required by the law doesn't mean that people follow it. And so every now and then, much too common for my preferences, is we'll get calls from folks who say, I was working for this employer and they don't have insurance. Now, there's a website where I can go and I can verify, did this employer have coverage or not? And that's initially our first step to see if it is. And the biggest problem with getting injured with an employer who doesn't have insurance is collecting. Now, a lot of folks think, well, the employer is very rich, etc. But if the employer doesn't have any assets, if, for example, all they've got is a couple of tools and a few trucks and everything, and even those trucks, they borrowed money to borrow those trucks, you may be dealing with somebody who doesn't have assets, okay? So you can get an order saying that they have to pay $150,000, but if they don't have $150,000, they're not going to pay you. And if you start going after their accounts, if you try to start attaching their property, pretty soon they're going to file for bankruptcy. And so what are your options if you are injured with somebody who doesn't carry insurance? We're going to talk a lot about this. In my next video, I'm going to talk about how your employer might not be insured, but you may have access to another employer's insurance policy. It's called statutory employer, but we're going to talk about that later. So you've actually got kind of two options in those situations, and you kind of have to discuss that with an attorney who knows what they're doing before you go one route or the other, okay? But if you recall, we said, listen, if you're injured on the job, you can't sue your employer even if your injury occurred because they were negligent. However, that's only true if they carried work comp insurance. If they did not carry workers' compensation insurance and their negligence caused your injury, you can sue your employer for negligence in court. So option number one is you can sue them in court for negligence and go that way. Option number two is you can still file a claim in workers' compensation and go after them for workers' compensation benefits. You can't do both, okay? You can either do one or the other. What are the advantages to going one route versus the other? How would you make that decision, okay? Regardless of the route that you go through, you still are dealing with the issue that they may not have workers' compensation insurance. And even if they have other kinds of insurance, like, employer's business liability insurance, those policies also probably, by their very terms, exclude coverage for work-related injuries, okay? So either way, you have an issue about can you collect those benefits, all right? So if you go the personal injury route, you're looking at a few things. Okay, here's the good and here's the bad. The good is you can sue for a lot more damages. For example, you can recover 100% of your lost wages, not just 2/3. You can recover for pain and suffering. You can't get pain and suffering under workers' compensation. You can also recover for future wage loss. which is a lot easier to get in personal injury lawsuit than it is in workers' compensation, okay? So those are the advantages. You can get a lot more damages, okay? Now, if you can't collect, what good is it? You've got a very nice piece of paper that says they owe you $1 million, but if they don't pay it, they don't have essentially getting nothing. What are some of the bad routes about going personal injury? Okay. Number one is it takes a lot longer to go to court against an uninsured employer. You have to file suit in a district court. It takes longer. You need to get a lawyer. That lawyer typically is going to charge 1/3 to 40% of what they get for you, assuming they can recover. You are also looking at perhaps more expenses because, for example, in a civil lawsuit, certain documents can't come in automatically as they do in workers' compensation, so it can be more expensive to litigate those cases. And finally, even if a jury says, yes, the employer was negligent, yes, the employer should pay the medical bills, etc., if the employer doesn't have any money, they can still file bankruptcy and you are still on the hook for the medical bills. The hospital that treated you, they're going to still go after you. They can still go after you, even though you've got a order from a court saying, hey, this employer is responsible to pay me. The hospital will say, that's fine. You go get them to pay you, but we're still coming after you, okay? So that's the good and bad about going the personal injury suit side. Now we're going to do the workers' compensation side. Some advantages of going through workers' compensation, even if the employer is uninsured. Number one is, it tends to be a lot quicker, a lot faster. If you're going to file a lawsuit against somebody in district court, you're talking 2-3 years. In workers' compensation, if you've got everything ready to go, you can get in front of a judge between 4 and 6 months, okay? Number two, tends to be cheaper to litigate those cases because all you have to do is produce the medical records. You can get them into evidence. You don't have to call in the medical folks as witnesses to lay what's called authentication foundation for those documents. So it can be a lot cheaper and easier to present evidence in workers' compensation. And number three is the attorneys who handle workers' compensation cases will only charge typically between 20 and 25%. A lot of attorneys do charge a little more than the standard 20% on uninsured cases because those cases can be riskier. Because why? You still have the problem with collecting. In other words, you've got that piece of paper from an administrative law judge that says, okay, they owe you this amount of money. If they don't have the money, if they declare bankruptcy, you're still stuck with a nice looking piece of paper which says that they owe you money. However, there is one big difference in workers' compensation that has always been the case. We're going to talk about the second big difference in another video, which is once you have an order in workers' compensation saying that your injury is due to a work injury and a particular employer is responsible, now the medical providers can't come after you. So if you've been injured on the job and went to the hospital, let's say you were hospitalized, let's say they did multiple surgeries, a really serious injury, and now the medical bills are $150,000, $200,000. If you do a personal injury lawsuit, number one, you're not going to get an order until 3 years. And even if you get an order, the hospital can still come after you. In workers' compensation, though, you're going to get an order between 4 and 6 months. Once you get that order and the hospital starts to bother you, you can say, you can't come after me. And if the hospital says, well, we're still going to come after you, you can go after the hospital for penalties. Just ask a particular hospital in Grand Junction about that. And so you are protected from collection from the medical providers, and the medical providers have to go after the employer and they can't bother you. That is one big difference in terms of what options. And the other thing is in work comp, you don't have to prove negligence. In a personal injury lawsuit, you have to show that the injury occurred due to the employer's negligence. What if it wasn't due to their negligence? Then you're going to have to go through the work comp anyway. Work comp negligence doesn't matter. Work comp has a lot more advantages, even though your damages may be less than what you could theoretically get awarded in personal injury, because A, cheaper, B, faster, C, the order protects you from collections D, you don't have to prove negligence. Which route is better for you depends on the circumstances of your cases. It is something that you need to talk with an attorney on, and that's why Kaplan Morrell has been serving injured and disabled workers in Colorado since 1995. And if you or anyone you know has been injured on the job, particularly with an uninsured employer, just know you have a favorite soft part in my heart. I do handle uninsured employers. They are a pain in the butt. You need help, and these workers need help, and it's one of my ways that I give service to the community is to help injured employees who have uninsured employers, because they're really in a rock and a hard spot. That's why you should recommend, if you or someone you know is injured on the job in Colorado, let them know about Kaplan Morrell. We've been serving injured and disabled workers since 1995, and you can call and make an appointment at 970-356-9898. You can touch base with us on kaplanmorrell.com. You can text us. You can send us messages via WhatsApp, +1 970-356-9898. And with that, we would love to be able to help you. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, share, comment below. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions. And with that, thank you for spending part of your day with me. Bye.